Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dadziner podcast. Today, I'm joined by Randy Plemel, who's up in New York City. Welcome to the show, Randy.
Yeah, good to be here. Hey, internet.
And Randy, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your family?
Yeah, so I live in Queens, New York. I am a public sector designer. I started my life as an architect. I'm trained as an architect. I did that for long enough that I then realized that I needed to go a little more upstream than buildings. And then I switched to being basically a full time design and innovation consultant. I was with IDEO for 12 or 13 years. And then during the beginning part of the pandemic, they ended up closing the office. And instead of moving out in New York, I decided now would be a good time to go out on my own. And so I'm the owner and mostly single person design shop called Expedition Works. And for the last 4 years, we've been working pretty much on democracy promotion and public sector engagement with the City of New York Civic Engagement Commission, with AARP around helping build livable communities for people of all ages, especially the 50 plus, and working with a Northeast state on helping design better digital tools. And so I my wife and I live here. We rent here in this apartment in Long Island City, and we have two kids, a third grader and a kindergartner. And so the interesting part, we're a home of two designers. My wife is still an architect. She kept the faith, and it's been super interesting seeing. We're not trying to guide them to any sort of like you must be a designer or not, because architecture and design is tough. But it's been super interesting the last 7, 8 years just to see what they've been interested in. And,
Hmm.
we've got a house full of tools ranging from, safe crayons all the way up to like stuff that I need to keep locked up because it's dangerous for kids. And it's always interesting to see what they gravitate to in their crafting.
Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. I know in our house too, my wife has a room that's full of sewing supplies, craft supplies, all sorts of stuff, and um, the girls just rate it on a regular basis. But
Yeah.
it's cool that they desire to do that. They want to be creating, which is really neat.
Yeah, it's super interesting because it's gotten to the point where I have to hide some of my materials that I need for work. Like I have to hide Sharpies and I have to hide my good pens, even like artist tape. I have to like hide that or they will they'll take it. I was looking around today. I was like, oh, I guess I got to buy more artist tape for work because I'm out of it. And I work from home. And so it's both, it's fun to do that. It's also sort of like, well, I guess, this is what a corporate card is for. But it's even things like when they closed the office at IDEO, I took the button maker, and the button maker has like this die cutter of different sizes. And for a while, we would just like cut out things, and my son and daughter would just like make things with it to give away to people, or do whatever. And we have a like a sticky back machine that you can run paper through it, and it adds sticker to the back, and we'll just cut out things, and they'll give them away at class. So it's super it's really interesting to see both what they gravitate to, and how are they using tools, and both like this is how you use them in ways that you would never imagine.
Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. And have you always kind of involved them in the things that you are working on, or have you kind of created side things to engage them?
I think both. I was doing a project for a let's see, a large sports league, and I was helping rethink how people enter
Hmm.
the venue. And you know part of that, I was in their offices building full scale prototypes of entry things, but also I was building it at home because, again, like it's what's interesting about working at home is I have all my tools, but if I can outfit a giant league with a laser cutter and stuff like that, I'm going to do that so I can do that, the dangerous stuff somewhere else. And so what I did with my daughter, we would start to, I would cut things out, I would tape them up and be like, okay, let's walk through this, like let's pretend we're going to a game. And the it was interesting that the big problem we were trying to solve for was both like what technology we can use, but also how to make it more accessible and equitable, and how to
Mm.
do that with kids or families. And so in the beginning, when we were kind of going broad, I made a bunch of like pretend magic bands, and like, here, wear an Apple Watch and scan it on this Arduino that I made. And part of that was, it was interesting just to see from kind of a kinematic and bodily way and human factors how people use, but also, again, kids are amazing at destroying things in ways that you would just like never realize. And so that was like one interesting thing that ended up like um, being built, uh, and going to market for someone else. And then there's just even like little things. I got grants from the city to do a participatory art project, and I did it at PS1 MoMA here in Queens. And it's called Block Builder. So for a long time, I've been drawing these different buildings and things like that in Illustrator. So here's like a big roll. This is a building, a pretty famous building in Soho. And then, like, this is a bunch of row houses right across the street from the park we go to. And as I was building all these different stickers and things, I'd be like, hey, which building should we do next? And we'd be walking around our neighborhood and be like, hey, take a picture of that. So I take a picture and then, put in an Illustrator and put it up, and then set up a couple tables outside PS1 MoMA. And the prompt was, let's imagine what our block could be. And
Mm.
so there was a bunch of single family homes, a bunch of like row houses. Here is IRT station in the Upper West Side. And we were just asking people to imagine what their block looked like. And this is what one of my kids made. So you could sort of see as I pan it over, there's just like a bunch of different stickers there, different ideas. There's some clouds. And here's one of my kids made. And I made PS1. And then, we wanted to double stack this one. We wanted to go from a 3-story row house to a 6-story row house. This is a park we used to live nearby in Greenpoint. And here's some more, Soho like old manufacturing buildings. And so that was cool in that, as I was designing both the how we play the game, I was sort of play testing with her
Hmm.
and working through like, well, should we do it like this? Should we do that? Do we need like a horizon line? Is it a big piece of paper? Is it a small piece of paper? Do we need more? And then even when I was sketching up and drawing and illustrating these things, we're like, okay, like pick some colors. And so we would just go and kind of go on a color picker and be like, okay, let's do that one. Oh, you want pink? Cool. And then let's find the tertiary color. No, let's not do that. Let's do another one. And so that was fun to both have them part of it, both like doing the work, but also at the actual event inside.
Nice. What is it like? I mean, you're creating a participatory experience, and yeah, your kids kind of helped you hone in on it. But I'm sure still, once you got out there and people were interacting with these, different blocks, what was like the most surprising thing that happened? Whether it be like, oh wow, I would have never thought that that's incredible, or like, oh, this is actually kind of scary.
Yeah, we ran out of trees really quickly. So
Oh,
people
nice.
like that was like we ran out of it was like within a very short amount of time, which,
Wow.
thinking back, you're like, oh yeah, people love trees and green space. That makes a lot of sense. I think also people were adjusting, they were kind of doing portrait views sometimes, and they were kind of doing it in different ways. They were stacking it. We had a bunch of pencils and I had blank stickers for them to to draw. And so it confirmed to me that you can create a lot of complexity with a lot of basic building blocks, and that the everybody, I think the universality of stickers and stamps, it really lowers the people's inhibitions. And it was one of those things where you could do sort of side by side, where there was oftentimes, you know, jaded New Yorkers side by side with each other, kind of like talking and having a conversation about, oh, you put that there, why'd you do that? And then across the way there'd be, a parent and a child doing the same thing. And
Hmm.
so a lot of my work, I like to use those, those artifacts, those things, so that we can allow people to get it out of their brain and get it into a piece of paper. These were almost like literal stamps. I prototyped a bunch of them on a laser cutter with just, um, lasered out the stamp part and tried it. It just wasn't. I couldn't make enough with a short amount of time. And then it was during it was like during the still during the first wave of COVID, and so there was like a lot of consideration of like, oh, do we want people handling the same things over and over again versus like a roll of stamps? It
Hmm.
felt like, as I was playtesting with other people, it felt like safer, with air
Yeah.
quotes.
Yeah. Um, I mean, once this is like a different wing of design than I practice in, and so I'm like very fascinated. You have a plethora of examples of what people have done with these blocks and stickers and all, like this interactive. And like to me the fun part was like creating the interactivity, or would be creating the interactivity and watching it happen. But then you have to go from that to synthesis and action. Is that like part of your responsibility? What does that process look like?
Yeah, I think in this case, for Block Builder, and I did some synthesis and review on what was there, but in this was just the 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 payoff was people having the conversation.
Got it.
In other areas, like when I've worked with the city of LA around engagement using other stickers or other, oftentimes I use like voting dots or things like that. There it is more incumbent to synthesize and to make sense out of what you heard. I was working with NYU with some graduate students on trying to figure out, create a system of what's the right amount of survey information that you can ask people, so that then you could sort of check on what's the delta between the people you spoke with and, say, the people in your neighborhood. And so that's something that we did last year, and we're going to try to. I don't have a fancy name for it yet, but I keep thinking it's, there's always this problem of when you're doing public participation and community engagement, that oftentimes the people who show up aren't always representative of the community, and the
Hmm.
community can be air quoted really easily, because it really depends on what it is you're looking for feedback on. Because like if it's a bus stop, the community could be quite small and contained in terms of a geographic area. But if it's, say, redesigning the Queens bus network, that community is much bigger. Or if you say, like, I want to redesign policing in New York, that is all of New York. And so that community looks different. The demographic of New York is different than Queens, which is different than Long Island City, which is different than the census tract I live in. Radically different. And so I'm working with others on is trying to get a little bit more quantitative view, so that we can compare, so that when we see a delta, we can go get more feedback and more engagement with people.
That's really interesting. Something I wanted to dig into a little bit deeper is, as you made the switch from architecture to this more holistic design, that happened pre children.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And so, you know, some people might look at it and be like, oh wow, he was going to have kids and so he wants to build a better world. But like, what was the motivation other than coming more upstream, like you mentioned earlier, what was the motivation, and are you proud of this now, and like more, does it have more purpose now that you have kids too?
Part of me switching and going upstream, I think part of it was this: I was just burnout of architecture. I was working, for I think a really permissive owner, and our clients, one of my clients was American Apparel, and I was kind of the Johnny Appleseed of American Apparel, spreading them throughout the world. And for young Randy, that was great in that some weeks we get into work on a Monday and be like, okay, well, there's something wrong in London. You have to get on a plane that night. And so my girlfriend then, wife now, that was acceptable. And that, there was some grumbling but then again, I got to go to China. I got to start that company in Australia, and she would come with me when times were when they would line up. And so that retail is tough,
Hmm.
and that client was very difficult, but also pretty freeing in that each store was kind of a prototype, and you could, if you mess up, they weren't that permanent and you could fix it pretty easily. And that was great. Uh, but then I'd always liked IDEO. I'd always, I've the method cards somewhere in my house where the kids loved them as well. And so they were hiring, and I thought, the time is right. It was also during the last economic
Mm-hmm.
downturn where all of a sudden, I was working, I think 2 or 3 days a week at my main job, and then freelancing for another like 3 days a week. So I was pretty burned out. And so that was a good change in that I started focused as an environments designer, but really what I really enjoy about uh, architecture school, the tools that it gave me, is that on one hand, you have to zoom down, and you have to figure out where the plumbing goes so that the toilet doesn't make a mess. So there's that. And then you have to zoom out and understand how the thing you're designing sits within culture, sits within history, sits within all these other things, 1,000-foot view. And at the same time, you have to work well with each other. Uh, Generally, you don't build things by yourself. Maybe a piece of shelter or something like that. And so you generally need a client, and they generally, like, the best clients have a strong point of view, but they trust you. You have people you need to design for, and you need to, I very quickly realized, like, the people you're designing for, you're kind of guessing at, and I didn't. That always kind of sat weird with me. And you have to work with, a bunch of other experts, be they electricians to plumbers to, local architects to structural engineers, across the way to get it done. And when it works, it's awesome. And it's you could take something that you have an image on the screen or on a piece of paper, and you can look up at the finished thing and be like, yeah, we did that. That's awesome. When it doesn't work, it's a little bit like our library here in Long Island City, designed by a star architect, that doesn't work at all. That
Hmm.
has an amazing idea, but they're being sued because it's all full of steps. It was over budget and delayed, and it's probably a good example of what not to do. And so, working at IDEO, I was able to really move into thinking about experience design and service design, which oftentimes, you create an experience through orchestrating services from, say, digital tools to roles to, a business model to spatial cues or offices or things like that. And I did that for about 12 or 13 years. A lot of what I was building towards, especially in the last 5 years, was trying to take a lot of these tools around, say, human centered design or participatory design. And yes, like those can be used for profit enterprises, but you can also use them for nonprofit and governmental enterprises because, like, big surprise, government is just a big group of people trying to do something. And the needs and desires of people in government look a lot similar to, say, the needs and desires of, say, like a giant bank. And the same problems happen. Like, there's everyone's siloed, no one can speak to each other, decision making is slow.
Hmm. Having this conversation with you, and we were talking a little bit before we got on about your kids having all of these tools at the house, and it's fun to watch them gravitate towards certain interests. You seem like a very curious person. How are you passing that curiosity or attempting to pass that curiosity down to your own children without a forceful hand?
Yeah, there's like the messy desk versus like the clean desk person. I'm the messy desk person. My wife is the clean desk person, and so that's there's tension there. And so I try to keep clean desk as much as possible, but I try to just have stuff out and kind of create a permissive structure to say, like, yeah, you want to use that, but like, let me show you how to use it. It's like, hey, you want to use this die cutter to cut buttons? Like, let me show you how to do it. And right now my third grader can kind of die cut this, but it's mostly me who does it. And so it's just sort of like stair stepping up. Also, sort of like, see these markers over here. Those were like my work markers, and now they're sort of just like the family's work markers. And so part of it is, I think, just letting go. I think as I matured as a designer, and I hope as a person, that idea of, like, in the beginning, I think I wanted to do it all and have control over it all. And then as I got older, and especially after I had kids, it was like, well, you can't control everything and you can control yourself.
Mm,
And it's not that big of a deal. It's
yeah.
like, um, I have to go and buy artist tape. Well, that's not that big of a deal. But, I think last week, the whole living room was like a carnival. Like, the kids set up a carnival with cardboard boxes and paper and things like that. And so that's probably the hardest thing is figuring out when we're like, okay, that's enough. Like it's time to, like, clean up the carnival and get rid of this stuff. Take photos of it. Let's, like, clean the slate. Like, let's wipe the mandala clean. Um, that's hard because they're kids and they grow
Yeah.
attached to things. But then again, they're also kids that in like 3 days they like, there's something new. And
Yeah.
so a lot of what I've tried to do, both for myself and with the kids, is just like, what are the tools that I can have, and the things, we have stacks of paper in this art bin here that they can grab and play with, and just kind of keep it stocked. My youngest, he loves number blocks. And so, we got him Stampolines. And so, the other day, he just, in the morning, because he wakes up in an ungodly hour, we just sat and I had coffee and he did Stampolines. And just like the stickers, these are like little pieces of creativity that they can assemble however they want. Both my wife and I really try to reinforce, like, there's just, especially with art, there's no right way. Let's just try it. And we one of their favorite places is MoMA. And so we have a membership, and we just go for like 20 or 30 minutes, and you know run them through the different galleries. Sometimes they're like, oh, we took them to the wrong gallery. Like, oh, there's a special show. There's like, this is maybe a little bit too old. But the last time we were there, there's this wheelie thing by Duchamp, and it only comes on like 2 times a day or maybe 1 time a day. And my son was super interested in it. It was like that. And he He's like, we got to get back to it. And so we were at literally the other end of MoMA, and he was like, Papa, it's almost time for it. And so I picked him up, and we like ran through, and this was like 11 o'clock on a weekend. And we ran through dodging tourists to get, back to that. And we just sat down in front of it, and he saw it. And so I think we see our job as the opportunity of showing things to the kids, and they don't need to like it all, and that's okay. um we still have our giant art history book that I'll just like bring it out, and I'll just start flipping through the pages, and just to like, oh, look at this. And so um if they become designers or artists, cool. If not, then they will have a well-rounded education and realize what beauty comes in many different flavors. And so um I think the same thing goes with, say, like sports,
Mm-hmm.
or say ballet, or anything. Is like, can we try it? And uh if you do it for a little bit, that's great. My oldest did soccer for like a year and turned to me, it's like, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm like, great, that's cool. Let's try something else. And
Yeah.
as they get older, we might have to get a little bit more serious about it. But that's fun to just figure out this middle ground. Like, I don't want them to like flirt around and be like uh, dilettantes, but I mean, they're kids. They just like, let's go out and run amok.
Yeah. Curious, as we're winding down here too, there's two questions I ask every guest. What has been your greatest parenting success or greatest parenting
I
failure?
think the learning, this goes back to just like let it go, and just, as a designer, I think we're taught as that you have to have opinion on everything, or you have to, give feedback on everything. And I don't know, that was sort of like taught to us in architecture. And a lot of what I strive to do is just like not say anything, or, just let it go, and just be there. And that in the moment presence is always tough, especially as, I'm trying to run a business. Even, when I pick them up after school, there are some days I'm just like, hey, let's go to the park. I have to take a phone call, but then after that, we're going to run amok. That presence is always a struggle. And I think it's probably for everyone. I think what I'm proudest of is just how curious the two kids are. And like every day, when we drop them off at school, it's like, hey, let's be kind, let's be curious, and have fun.
Well, very cool. It was a great conversation. I learned a lot. I took a bunch of notes of things I'm going to look up afterwards. But if folks wanted to find you online, where should they look?
Yeah. So my business is Expedition Works. So expedition.works. And we're a small but mighty firm. We also have a podcast and a series of pamphlets that we make called Journey with Purpose. And you can see that at jwp.news. So an expedition is just a journey with purpose. You are going somewhere for a reason. And so I always talk about, our most fun projects are when clients are doing something for a reason and they have somewhere to go. And so those are two places where you can find us.
Well, thank you so much, Randy, and it was great having you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. See you, Internet.